Hello, everybody. It's good to be back and sharing on my reflections on the journeys since my big conversion experience in at the end of 1994. And there's something that I've saw that it's very relevant and not a coincidence over the last couple of weeks that I've been doing this, and is the relevance of the Blessed Sacrament throughout it all. And that's what I see with more clarity now than I have ever in my life. And I am an associate of the Blessed Sacrament, a church recognised associate under the auspices of the Blessed Sacrament Fathers, the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament. And it was probably something that one of the priests of that had said the other day in reference to my videos. It was Father Emmanuel Azir, who had been our spiritual director. I was secretary for his group when we were in Dublin doing a course on Amardian spirituality. Father Manuel had sent me a comment on my reflections, and he said something very pertinent in it. That was like that the reflections would give us a direction. All of us that listen to them would give us a direction, and I know where he was coming from, and that the direction would be to what's important, and that we could all learn from that what's important. And that really touched me, because he was 100%, and I don't believe it was a coincidence, because nothing here in the last few weeks is a coincidence, but they've all sort of come together. They've all converged into one thing, and I that's the best way to put it. It's all converged into one thing, and that is the importance of the Mass and the importance of the Eucharist as the source and the summit of the Christian life. And this has been something that's always been with me from day one. And the Lord attracted me to that first. And we know from the scriptures that nobody can come to the Lord except the Father draws them. And nobody can know the Father unless the Son draws them to the Father. It's the Son that teaches about the Father. And from day one, the Father has drawn me to Christ and His Word and His Eucharist. And this has been my whole journey, and this has been my focal point. And the more focal I became on the Word and the Eucharist, the more focal the Lord became on me, drawing me more and more to that, the importance of what I'm reflecting on, what I'm meditating on, what I'm contemplating. And as I said about, all the experiences that I have been like pointing towards Christ and the Eucharist. And the great one of the one that I say is probably one of the most profound experiences I've had would have been that time when drawn to World Youth Day. Pope John Paul at that time, before he became a saint, in Rome with the 2 million, and that sense of making me aware of there was living the Mass, like heaven on earth, from the book of Revelations. the lamb and the lamb and the altar, all the things, the slain lamb and Christ suffering, death and resurrection, all conveyed in the Mass. The blood and water which gushed forth from the heart of Jesus, poured forth for us. All this I saw and took in and believed in the power of God's wisdom at work and faith. And this has been more and more and more and more revealed over the last weeks. And today it's been no coincidence either, because today is a very important gospel reading, and has there's been an important gospel reading there for the last few days, and that is John 6, where John is conveying the importance of the Eucharist, that Christ is the body, blood, soul and divinity, truly present in the bread of life, come down from heaven onto the altar for us, and that we not only worship and adore him in that presence, but we also receive him, body, blood, soul, divinity, and we receive him when we partake of the Eucharist during the Mass, during the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And this is so important. This is what God has been making so clear, that the importance of that for each and every one of us, and the importance of coming to know that the Holy Spirit that was sent would bring everyone to the knowledge of the truth, would bring them to teach them and lead them to the truth. And Jesus comes among the Jews and Hellenists, the very much Jews and brought up in Greek culture. And Jesus says, I'm the truth. Because you remember that, the Greeks were philosophers, like Aristotle and Socrates, and Aristotle, some of his great famous words were, mankind desires to know, the human being desires to know. And what it is we desire to know, as the great St. John Paul told us, is the human being desires to know the truth. That John Paul says, within the heart of every human being lies the seed of truth, placed there by God to draw mankind to the knowledge of the truth. And this is what the philosophers searched for, that truth. That search for the knowledge of the truth. And when Jesus comes, he says, I'm the truth you're searching for. I'm the truth that you're searching for. I'm the way. Because the philosophers were looking to know a purpose, where they were going, what were they to do and where they were to go, what was the purpose of life. And Jesus is no concept. He's no ideology. He's not an ideology. He's not a concept. He's a person. And he comes as a person, a human being, but God. And then he speaks about being the bread that has come down from heaven. And that unless we eat this bread and drink this blood, there's no life in us. And this is the par excellence of the presence of God in this earth. The par excellence is the Eucharist. Where two or three gather, the Lord's there. We know we're the Lord's in Scripture. He's in people, he's in nature, but we believe God to be the par excellence because it's truly his body, blood, soul and divinity, substantially present in the Eucharist. And we become what we eat. Just, listen to that again. We become what we eat. When we partake of the Eucharist, we become like Christ himself. The Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity, we become part of. God takes and becomes in us, and and he brings us in a supernatural way. He supernaturalizes us in his Eucharist and prepares us for when we will meet him, that we will be prepared to meet him. And this is the importance. The importance of this is there's it's just outstanding above everything else. And I realised that from day one, that the Lord was placing in me something that was so deep that when I would have went to read his word and read the Bible, and I would find that he is who he says he is, because he taught me along the way, and when I would read about things, I would experience similar. It was as if he was teaching me to come and see. Come and see that the Lord is doing the same things today, that the same Lord is doing the same things today. And it's the same God who spoke to Moses, and Moses was just as startled when the Lord says, "I'm the God of the living." And he talked about the Abraham and Jacob and Isaac. He's the God of the living. He's the God of he's the God of Moses as well. He's the God of our fathers. The same God they worshipped right through history. And it's the same. He's the same God today, because he doesn't change. He's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. Unchanging. So we're worshipping the same God at this moment. The same God's speaking and guiding and revealing himself to us if we let him, if we open ourselves up and we let him, especially in these times. And this is what's so important. There's something about these times now that the relevance of the Mass and the Eucharist are paramount, because there's something from my spirit that I'm learning that is to do with this unbelief that will cause. It's the unbelief in the world that's causing that's diminishing our faith in the Eucharist and the Mass. And I don't think it's a coincidence today that we see that number 666 that we hear about. We see today that they're in the readings today, John 6:66. The 3 6s. Whether it's a coincidence or not, I don't know. But just look at John, John 6:66. And Jesus is talking, he's been through the John, so he's talking about the bread of life, and he's talking then about the unbelievers. And it's the unbelievers in this, and our faith today in the Eucharist, that Jesus is truly, and that we truly need to eat and partake of the body and blood of Christ during the Mass. And to me, there's this sense of what's going on today was something so inconceivable. It was inconceivable to me that I would ever not have public Mass worldwide. And because that's something that's it's inconceivable to all of us here, because there's none of us have seen anything like it the last 100 years. Nor is there anybody come and tell us the last 100 years what it was like. So we got to really start to discern and ask ourselves, why would God allow this? Why would God allow this to happen? And pray and seek discernment in this as to why he would obstruct the very thing that we need so much, we would be obstructed from receiving that which we need so much, the source and the summit of our Catholic Christian faith. Why would there be such obstructions? Why would God be allowing this? Because I don't believe that God would be saying, I want it. Because it would be counter, it would counter everything that we believe. So why would he be allowing it unless there's something he wants us to learn in our need of it first, our need of the Mass? Have we been taking the Mass for granted? Have we been standing up, placing our faith, placing everything, because it is everything? Or is it that we have now allowed the unbelievers that Jesus talks about, same today, yesterday, today and tomorrow, the same unbelievers that he spoke about then, he's speaking about today, and they're getting to the point where they're able to move the holy sacrifice? Is it governments, leaders in governments, people in high places, as we hear in Ephesians, that it's not against flesh and blood, but against powers, principalities in high places. And something's happening that, of all things that we never thought possible, we're beginning to see that the holy sacrifice of the Mass is being subtly pushed away, moved away from us, in front of our faces. And what are we going to do about it? I came up with a lovely inspiration today, and I was thinking again and reflecting on my journey, and I'd forgot about something very, very, very important, but probably never forgot. Probably God's way of to reflect on it personally. And that was very, very early on after my conversion. I was asked to go to Knock by a very good friend of the family's, and a very good friend I had for the rest of her life was a woman who took pilgrimages started doing a pilgrimage from our parish to Knock, her and her husband. And they had asked me to go to, she had asked me to go to Knock, and she had asked other friends, because we grew up in the same street, and I asked other people to go. But when I got there, as people would know when they're in Knock, a lot of us, we would pray and walk around the old church and the apparition chapel. And I was spotted there praying around, was brought there by a priest. And he came over and he started to speak to me. And he says, I liked your prayer and the time you were taking there, and your reflection and your prayer. And because of that, we got talking away, and I told him about where we were from. We're from Larne, and I was down. person from the street that we grew up on, and that, you know, her and her husband was bringing the pilgrimage from her parish, and I was saying, you know, that it's great that everything else is there, you know, a lot of very, very devoted and do the rosary and very much very Marian based, and I says, but we haven't any priests with us, and it would have been great to have priests with us if we could have had a mass or something. Says, I says, that would have been the pinnacle. And he says, I'll do it for you. And he says to me, he says, the next time you're coming, he says, I want you to phone me and I'll prepare, and I do Sunday Mass. I'm a residing priest here. And he says, I'll do Sunday Mass whenever the weekend you're coming, and it'll be at 10 o'clock. And I'll offer that Mass up for the intentions of the pilgrimage, people in the pilgrimage, and for your parish and for your town. And I was absolutely overwhelmed, gobsmacked on the way home, thinking, you know, how good God is to somebody like me to come down and be at Knock. And the next year he done exactly that, and done continuous years. And every time I come down, I would say to Father Burke, you know, we're coming down, I would meet him, I'd go up and speak to him at his house, and a great, great man, very straight man. But the old school I talk about, the old school I like, men who no back doors, say it as it is, and his faith in the Eucharist, his devotion to the Mass was outstanding, a real example of an outstanding devotion to the Mass. And I learned from him along the way, and this is very powerful, that what God's expressing along the way with these reflections, and the importance of the Mass, and the importance of the Mass in my life, and the importance of the Mass to the people that he has placed in my life along the way, and how friendly that we have become together. And I see this so clear now, so clear. And this man got up from a sick bed. I was told by the woman that we were, the place we were staying in, who knew him well and knew because she lived there, and she says that he's literally, the man's literally dying, and he got up from his deathbed to come and celebrate Mass for you and the pilgrimage. And it was like, wow, what a man. And he would offer that Mass up, and offered up for us. So we were there in the apparition chapel where our Blessed Mother appeared, and I would do the readings. He would ask me to do the readings and the prayers of the faithful, and if some of the others who would do Eucharistic Mass and that, and made them, helped them to participate, and made them feel so welcome and so part of. And it was our pinnacle, that woman, God rest her, and her husband, that was the pinnacle too of our devotions, is that to have the Mass offered up for us, and that man to be there, that priest, praying and offering up the Mass and offering it up there and then for us, and speaking about the people that would come each year, and he would speak about our town, or Larne, and the parish, and how good the way the peace process was going, and he was so glad that, and he kept praying and thanking God for the peace process and the change and the way things were the things that were happening in the north. And it was beautiful, and again, that kept going until I kept doing that, until there was no one really enough left to bring down. There was no one then coming forward at the last that I could bring down. And funny enough, for all them years, from 1995, I think that was, right up to about 2000 and 16, 17, and then that stopped, and Father Burke stopped saying the Mass there as well, and that was so There was no coincidence there that Father Burke stopped saying the Mass. He took Al, and then he died. And just to remember him, and remember him in your prayers, a very faithful priest, and very devoted to the Mass and to us, getting up, knowing how important it was to us, knowing how important the graces and the blessings would be that would be coming from the Mass for us. He got up out of his suffering to do that for us. And again, that's what I just want to convey. What I've learned is this sense of those with the faith and the belief, what God calls them and gives them greater faith, greater belief, greater graces, and then that sense of the powers and principalities that we're up against, always pressing on to obstruct the Mass, to obstruct Christ, to obstruct Christianity, to eradicate it, that it's just not relevant anymore for us. Try to make us believe that. Try to make us believe that it's old hat, that it's, that thing of legends and old wives' tales even. It's something now we've grown out of. We're more intelligent now to believe that. That was okay for myths and things, It's okay for less intelligent people, more simple people would have believed that. When it's the more simple people, it is the more simple people that believe it. Because the Lord said that himself. When he talked about the child, unless you become like a child. And, the intelligent people, it wasn't to the wise and the intelligent he came, but it's to the childlike that he came and reveals himself in this world. And I've heard bishops and all admit themselves that intelligence can be a huge barrier, towards faith. I've heard them say that when they've met very simple people, very simple saints in life, and they got to know them, and they could see that their own intelligence and that intellectualism was more of a barrier at times to what these people had. And they were the ones that became the saints. Think of that one. So this is what I'm trying to convey here is think of, and that's what I'm doing. And as Father Manuel says, in these reflections, it's reflective on a direction that'll teach a direction where we're going, or a direction for to discern. And that direction is, he's 100% inspiringly right. There is a direction, and the direction is that we direct our lives back and focus and orientate our lives back towards the Eucharist, back towards the Mass, and be